Soldiers have staged an uprising in Guinea's capital, Conakry, stating in a broadcast on state television that they've dissolved the country's constitution and government in the West African state in an apparent coup. The fate of Guinea's president, Alpha Condé, is still unclear. An unverified video showed him in the hands of soldiers from a unit of elite special forces who said they had staged a coup. However, the defense minister has been quoted as saying the attempted takeover has been thwarted. This follows hours of heavy gunfire near the presidential palace in the capital. There are unconfirmed reports that 3 soldiers have since been killed. President Condé was re-elected for a controversial third term in office amid violent protests last year. Meanwhile, a social media video purportedly of Guinean rebel leader Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya has since surfaced. In the video, Doumbouya says Guinea's constitution, the government and institutions have been dissolved.
The constant politicization of the public administration, poverty and endemic corruption has led Guinea's Republican Army, through the National Committee for Rally and Development, to take responsibility towards the people of Guinea. We have decided, after taking the president, who is now with us, to dissolve the current constitution and also to dissolve the government, to close the land and air borders also. We call on our brothers in arms to unite in order to respond to the legitimate aspirations of the people of Guinea. We also invite everyone to stay in their bases and continue their usual activities. We will not make the same mistakes as in the past.
For some analysis on the coup, we are now joined by international law expert Dr. Innocent Badasu. Dr. Badasu, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Thank you and good evening to your listeners.
Now, Dr. Badasu, we understand that President Alpha Condé is in detention at the moment in the wake of the reported coup, something the Defense Ministry denies. So what do you know so far?
I think that the denial is something that the official sources are expected to do. But the reality is also out there that we have seen the president in a very undignified way in which some other soldiers have also been around him. It is the first time we would see a president in such a manner, in a very demoralizing way. So the denial from the Defense Ministry can be considered as part of the PR of the Ministry of Defense. But the reality is that jubilations are on the streets of Conakry. People are excited, believing that we are going to have an end to an era where there will be a new beginning for the people of Guinea. And so those denials largely could be an attempt to see whether the defense minister would be able to rally around some loyal forces in the military to be able to have a countermeasure to deal with the situation that is at hand. And then also it is a face-saving strategy to be able to assuage the fears of the base of the president. Mind you, he has just come out of an election, disputed or not, he got an endorsement, or he won that election, however disputed, if you want to look at the things that have come out of the opposition quarters. So here the point is that the defense ministry or the president defense minister obviously needed to do a certain level of PR to be able to keep their base, to give some confidence to their base, basically.
Yeah. And soldiers have said that they have dissolved the constitution and the government in the West African state. Do we know what their agenda is going forward?
For this kind of military takeovers, partly driven by the discontent within the political class in Guinea, then again the discontent within the citizenry or amongst the population. Because of the seeming public approval so far, we would have to watch these for the next few days to see whether, one, we would not have a counter strategy from some loyal forces of the president. And then again, we would also have to see what would be the response of the sub-regional organizations such as ECOWAS or at the continental level, the African Union. Until some of these dynamics play out, it would be difficult to make a case as to what would be the immediate future of the Guinean democratic dispensation. But it is important to indicate that the leader has made a number of statements, and those statements in themselves reflects something that we need to pay particular attention. It reflects the developmental aspirations of the military and then also political aspirations of the military. Now, these aspirations are somehow creating a period of harmony between public disapproval of Alpha Conte's governance failures and also the desire of the military to be seen as the vanguards of public sentiment. And so it is important that we adopt a kind of a wait-and-see strategy, yes, and have a better understanding of how this would unfold.
Okay. And there are reports of several soldiers having been killed. Just how true are these reports? Do you know?
Now, the manner in which we have seen the president being arrested and kept by these forces under the command of Colonel Mamadi. Now, it is important to recognize that a sitting head of state is not readily available without a number of bodyguards, without some security arrangement. So for them to have access to him and create a scenario of detention certainly gives us a sense that either they completely wiped out the bodyguards of the president, or the bodyguards and the security details of the president completely acquiesce, seeing their peers or their colleagues making an advancement, that kind of military advancement. So certainly some amount of death may have been recorded. We have no official confirmation on the figures, but I am confident that you cannot have this kind of access to the president in such a military strategy without some casualties.
And President Conde was re-elected for a controversial third term in office amid violent protests last year. So can we trace the latest developments back to this unhappiness or discontent over his third term?
Yes, we have seen a very unusual attempt by the president to get a third term. And this was a president who came in 2010 after a long period of opposition and activism in Guinea. And so one would have thought that he would have a better appreciation and understanding of the country's history and political configuration, to the extent where he would simply exit the stage to allow for a new democratic era. But sadly, he went for a third term. That was something that brought about very deep division within the people of Guinea. We saw his main opposition candidate, Diallo, also going hard at him after the elections. And clearly there were a number of issues that came with the election, but of course he had the upper hand in this situation, and so took advantage and then got himself a third term. But there has been a silent disapproval of this third term from the people of Guinea. And part of it is what is culminating in the kind of response that the military is given to the situation. What I am not too sure would be the extent to which the aspirations of the military, especially the elite unit that has carried out this takeover, how their aspirations would align with the aspirations of the opposition figures, or if you like, the main opposition leader, Diallo. And so it's, again, another area to watch closely, because where there is a clash in aspirations, then obviously we're going to have a very protracted issue at hand in resolving. But if they can align, then obviously what it means is that we can have some mediated solution in the shortest possible time.
Yeah, and having said that, the mutinous soldiers are now citing rampant corruption, mismanagement, poverty for their actions. Are things that bad in the country?
Yes. When a military takeover happens across Africa and elsewhere around the world, you see the leaders immediately beginning to cultivate a natural atmosphere for acceptance. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the ways they do that, cultivating a natural atmosphere for acceptance, is to begin to highlight societal grievances. And so this is what I call the harmonization of grievances, such that you look legitimate. So it's a way of buying domestic legitimacy. Now, when they succeed in buying domestic legitimacy, what it does is that it makes it complex for any international intervention or the idea of sanctions and then also to get the military leaders out of office immediately. And so it's part of a strategy towards building domestic acceptance.
And speaking of domestic acceptance, and you've just used the term buying of, that particular narrative. Now, critics say the government has used restrictive criminal laws, as it were, to discourage dissent. So from what you've observed, is this correct?
Well, yes. We have a president who has gone for some kind of authoritarian tendencies to be able to deal with public protests that have characterized the last elections and pre-election activities. The entire electoral context was full of violence. We have a few deaths that have been recorded, and then also people have been arrested in ways that violate their human rights, and then also without recourse to proper judicial mechanisms for them to be able to have a right of defense. So all of these grievances are real on the ground. And the president seems unpopular in some parts of the country. And so these are the reasons why there is this level of domestic approval or acceptance for the military regime and the accompanying jubilation that we are seeing on the streets of Conakry.
Now, Dr. Badasu, just in closing, they also argue that while ethnic divisions have sharpened political rivalries, I mean, just how serious is the issue of ethnic divisions, and can they be mended?
One of the worries that I was entertaining before this interview would be how the country can unite, can rally around and build a national identity. Because increasingly, leaders emerge from some ethnic groups, and those ethnic groups simply come and rise with their folks, and there is a feeling of marginalization, political, economic, and social exclusion on the part of some other parts of the country and ethnic communities. And so that is a big issue, not just in Guinea, but in many parts of Africa, as we have seen. And so it's an important issue that the people of Guinea must deal with, the ethnic differences, which has not been a priority for Alpha Conde to be able to heal the nation. He was placed in a strategic position to be able to deal with some of these past injustices and feelings of marginalization. But unfortunately, that has not been the case. It was simply the consolidation of power, leading to a very disastrous ambition to have a third term.
International law expert, Dr. Innocent Badasu, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, and thank you so much for having me.